He wears no face, yet all remember him. No name, yet his shadow stretches across 10,000 years. If you clicked on this video because of that title, The King in Yellow, then you already suspect. You've seen the pieces. The missing figure during the Siege of Terra, the timeless hand guiding from behind curtains of golden myth, the cold silence between each Imperial truth. This is not a simple character profile. This is a forbidden play, staged across the stars, whispered through time, and watched by a god who no longer believes. What you're about to hear is not a tale of war. It is a tale of narrative, of control, of a man who once stood beside the Emperor and then chose something worse. To remain behind when the dream died, to keep the illusion alive by becoming it. You are not here to learn who Constantin Valdor was. You are here to understand who he became. He walks where records end, past the veil of data obfuscation, past the boundaries of canon, into that realm of half-memory and whispered myth where only the most dangerous truths survive. There is no image, only suggestion, no decree, only presence. And yet, wherever something moves that should not move, wherever history is rehearsed like a script already written, wherever warriors speak words that were never theirs, but always meant to be said, he is there. A mask, a watcher, a man unmoored from time. The story begins in silence, as all endings do. The mask hangs on the edge of vision, not worn, not claimed, but waiting. It is not an object. It is not even a mask. It is the absence of face. It is the shape left behind when identity is abandoned and narrative becomes king. In the depths of the Imperial palace, beyond where the custodians patrol, beneath the golden thunder of the throne, there is said to be a vault. Not of weapons, not of relics, but of masks, archetypes, roles. Every Imperial hero, martyr, and monster, practiced and performed over and over. And at the center of this vault waits the one who remembers all of them, the King in Yellow. But he was not always this. He was not born from myth. He was forged in gene labs, perfected in flesh and mind to be the Emperor's first blade. Before he vanished, before he wore the mask, before the lies unraveled, he was Valdor, the custodian, the prototype, the hand of divinity on Terra. And he was terrifying. No space marine, no mortal, no pre-march bore the same purpose as he did. For Valdor was not simply created to kill. He was designed to understand what the Emperor needed before the Emperor asked, a being tuned not just to war, but to silence, to loyalty, to the vacuum left behind by human doubt. And in that vacuum, he thrived. During the Great Crusade, Valdor did not campaign like a general. He did not posture like the Primarchs. He moved like a ghost beside the Emperor, his spear an extension of intention itself. He spoke rarely. When he did, his words were exact, weaponized, refined through layers of implication and hidden truth. The legions whispered about him. Mortals feared him. Primarchs respected him. And yet none could claim to know him. Because Valdor was not meant to be known. He was the silent fulcrum upon which trust rested. When the Emperor walked into the darkest halls of power, when he opened forbidden vaults, when he faced the ruin of lost technologies and secrets that could fracture a mind, it was Valdor who stood beside him, not as a shield, but as a mirror. He was not there to fight. He was there to remember, to record, to silently witness. But even then, something watched back. There are stories, quiet, forgotten, redacted even from the inquisitorial vaults, of moments during the crusade when Valdor hesitated. Not from fear, never that, but from recognition. As if the galaxy was already playing out a tragedy he had read before. As if each world, each conquest, was a stage. And he, not a soldier, but an actor, a player, following lines he had never written, standing beneath a spotlight no one else could see. It is said he looked up, once, in the ruins of a shattered civilization devoured by its own lies, and whispered, "This has happened before." No one answered. But the mask, the idea of the mask, was already forming. A role greater than custodian, a truth deeper than loyalty, a throne more hollow than gold. They say he was the first, not the first to be born, not even the first to serve, but the first to understand what service truly meant. Before the legions of Astartes took form, before even the Primarchs were scattered across the void, there was only the Emperor and Valdor. Where thunder warriors raged and died like sparks in the dark, Valdor endured, refined beyond their brutish instability, more than human, less than God, yet bound entirely to the will of one. The first custodian, the golden blade, the hand that did not tremble. From the very moment of his genesis, he bore no illusions of choice. His life was not a path, but a decree. The Emperor did not make allies. He made instruments. Valdor was the finest of them, a being bred not merely to fight, but to resonate with the Emperor's unspoken commands, to mirror his logic, to absorb his silence and return only certainty. To walk beside the master of mankind was not to bask in greatness. It was to dissolve in it, to be unmade and reshaped by vision too vast for words. And so Valdor walked the halls of unity with a stillness that frightened even gene-forged giants. He was not loud, he was not cruel, but wherever he passed, certainty followed, and so did dread. What did he see in those early years? The forging of the Custodian Guard was not a moment. It was a ritual, a descent into the absolute, a stripping of identity until only purpose remained. Valdor was not proud of his station, for pride requires a sense of self, and he had long since handed that over to the throne. It was not worship, it was worse. It was trust, perfect, unyielding trust in a God who refused the name, and for a time, that trust seemed justified. The Great Crusade unfurled like a tapestry across the stars, and Valdor stood at its center, not to command, not to lead, but to observe, always at the Emperor's side, always listening, always knowing what must come next. While Primarchs discovered planets and plotted empires, Valdor mapped the Emperor's silence. Where others questioned, he accepted. Where others hesitated, he moved. But it is what he did not say that lingers. There are few records of Valdor speaking at length, fewer still of him showing anger or doubt. But those who served close, remembrancers, proto-inquisitors, mechanicum dignitaries, they all reported the same sensation, that Valdor knew more than he revealed, that he acted not from conviction, but from obligation to a design far larger than any present could grasp. He would walk into a chamber, hear 2 words from the Emperor, and act as if an entire conversation had passed. He would watch a planet burn and utter only a single phrase. It had to end, and no one questioned him, because to question Valdor was to question the Emperor. But something else stirred beneath that golden mask, something unspoken. He began to notice patterns, identities repeated, myths rehearsed, enemies always arriving at the right moment to justify the next campaign. Too perfect, too precise. He began to wonder, were they liberating the galaxy or rehearsing it? One tale survives from the lost books of the Saturnine vaults, a classified archive buried under the Imperial Palace. A whispered recollection by an unnamed proto-adept who claims to have once served in Valdor's shadow. The man described Valdor standing in front of a hololithic display of the galaxy, unmoving for hours. When asked what he saw, Valdor allegedly whispered, "Not a crusade, a script." The adept was erased from history days later. And yet, this was the first crack, the first heresy, not against the Emperor's divinity, but against his honesty, against the belief that the Imperium was real. What if it wasn't a vision at all? What if it was a myth made manifest, an illusion given armor and fire? What if Valdor wasn't guarding a future, but performing a role in an endless theater? The Primarchs never saw it, or if they did, they buried it under pride. They were larger than life, divine in presence, mythic in voice. But Valdor was never meant to be seen. He was the mechanism beneath the mask, the frame behind the stage. And as the heresy loomed, he began to hear the audience stir. A murmur, a rustle of pages turning. The play was about to shift, and Valdor, the Emperor's perfect servant, could no longer be certain of the story's end. He began to ask himself a question so forbidden that even thinking it felt like treason. What if I am not the guardian of truth? What if I am its jailer? What if the Emperor did not ask for loyalty, but for silence? And silence was beginning to break. It is a dangerous thing to see too clearly, especially in a world built on illusion. Valdor did not shatter in a single moment. No revelation screamed its way into his soul. No demon whispered forbidden truths. No heretic seduced him. The lie was slower, subtler. It was in the weight of the Emperor's silence, the strange familiarity of events, the way triumph always seemed to require sacrifice, the way heroes were sculpted from suffering with such deliberate grace it felt rehearsed. Too clean, too poetic. He began to observe more than actions. He began to observe narratives. The Emperor's war of unification had not only destroyed gods, it had replaced them. His legions did not merely conquer, they performed. Every campaign had an audience. Every crusade, a moral. Every tragedy, a justification. Valdor started to see the threads. Perfectly laid arcs, mirrored sacrifices, repeating archetypes. This was not empire building. It was myth crafting, and he was its lead actor. What shattered his faith was not a betrayal of loyalty, but the revelation that loyalty was never his to give. That from the moment of his forging, he had not been a warrior, not even a custodian, but a prop. A golden figure on a stage, already written, made to carry the spear, deliver the glance, stand in the right place when history demanded symmetry. There is one moment, buried in apocryphal data caches, flagged for deletion by the Ordo Redactus, that marks the turning point. During the Council of Nicaea, the so-called trial of the Psychers, Valdor stood silent while the Primarchs debated. But one observer noticed him watching not the speakers, but the Emperor, watching with precision, not emotion, calculation. He saw it, the smallest thing. The Emperor smiled, just once, as if pleased not with the words, but with the shape of the moment, as if watching a scene unfold just as it had been written. And in that instant, Valdor understood. The Emperor was not improvising. He was directing. He wasn't allowing fate to unfold. He was ensuring it looked like fate. And suddenly, everything made sense. Magnus had to be restrained. Horus had to rise. Lorgar had to fall. Guilliman had to remain loyal. Every Primarch was a character in a mythic arc, built not to be free, but to fulfill symbolic purpose. Valdor had known each of them, fought beside them, watched them become legends. And now, he saw the script in each of their movements. Even their flaws were structured. Even their rebellions were necessary. He did not know the full end. That was not his role. The Emperor kept that secret, as he kept so many. But Valdor now saw that there was no meaning, no Imperium, no vision, only performance. A place so vast that trillions bled to keep the curtains from falling. And all of it, crafted to preserve the illusion of destiny. That is the lie. The Emperor didn't just lie to humanity. He lied through it. A lie of form, of function. A myth so durable it could survive apocalypse. He didn't need to win. He only needed the story to survive. Because stories become gods. Valdor recoiled, not in rage, not in madness, in recognition. He looked upon the golden throne, not yet the tomb it would become, and saw not a king, but a playwright, not a vision, but an endless script with no final act. And in that moment, Valdor ceased to be the first blade. He became aware, but awareness is not freedom. Not yet. The stage was still in motion. The heresy had not yet begun. Horus still smiled. The masks were still in place. So Valdor continued to serve. He guarded the gates. He held the spear. He obeyed orders. But now he watched differently. Not for enemies, but for repeats. For motifs. For recycled tragedies. He began to read events like scenes. Not stratagems. Not logistics. But narrative function. And in the silence of his chamber, alone beneath the palace, he began to ask, who writes this script? Is it the Emperor? Is it fate? Or is the act itself now alive? That was the true horror. That the Imperium no longer needed the Emperor. That the myth could write itself. That belief had momentum. That a lie believed by trillions could become more powerful than truth. And if that were so, then who was truly in control? The man who sat the throne? Or the man who knew it was hollow? Valdor's silence deepened. Not out of duty, but out of decision. He would not break the play. Not yet. He would watch, learn, study the edges of the page. Because one day, he would need to rewrite it. When a hero dies, there is ceremony. When a traitor falls, there is judgment. But when a myth steps off the stage, there is only silence. Constantin Valdor did not die during the Siege of Terra. That is the lie recorded. That is the comfort sold. While the walls of the Imperial palace cracked and the skies bled fire, while titans roared and primarchs screamed their last, Valdor vanished. Not struck down, not buried beneath rubble, not lost in some glorious last stand. He disappeared. No corpse, no witness, only absence. In a war defined by sacrifice, his was the one death that never came. Some said he took the fight to the War Master himself. Others claimed he led a secret mission beneath the palace, descending into the vaults never meant to be opened. A few, even among the Custodes, whispered that he walked into the throne room one last time and turned away. But the truth? It's worse than all of them, because Valdor chose to vanish. As the siege reached its climax, as the walls were breached and the Emperor prepared for his final confrontation atop the Golden Throne, Valdor stood at the crossroads of purpose. The man who had once mirrored the Emperor's will now saw it as a cage. A theater still burning, demanding its players perform to the last. He had seen the script unfold too many times. The noble death, the necessary betrayal, the redemption arc, the martyrdom, each moment perfectly placed. Every loss, narratively satisfying. Even the tragedy of Horus, especially the tragedy, played like a myth made flesh. And Valdor, the first blade, the silent watcher, finally understood. There would never be an end. Only more scenes, more acts, more roles to play and discard. The Emperor would die, or nearly die, or pretend to die. It didn't matter. The illusion would survive. The Imperium had to continue, not because it worked, but because it had been written to. And Valdor refused to be part of the script any longer. So he laid down his spear, not in defiance, not in despair, in liberation. He walked not into death, but out of narrative. Some believe he descended beneath the throne, into the sublevels where no light reaches, where the black cells hum with forgotten horrors, where even the Custodes do not go. Others believe he passed through a chamber known only to the Emperor and himself, a place called the Velvet Vault, where memory is unmade and roles are stored like costumes. But the truth is this: he stepped into silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of observation. He ceased to be seen. He became a myth with no stage. And in doing so, he found something the Emperor never could. Something no pre-march, no demon, no god had ever achieved. Freedom, without the eyes of the galaxy upon him, without the role of custodian, without the burden of performance. Valdor became something else. Not a warrior, not a rebel, not even a man. He became a witness. And slowly a new idea formed. If the Imperium could be shaped by narrative, if its faith could warp reality, then perhaps the only way to break the cycle was not to destroy the play, but to rewrite it, carefully, patiently, from within. To do that, He would need a new mask, a new name, a new myth. And so, from the shadows of forgotten war zones, from the dreams of dying inquisitors, from the folds of corrupted scripture, he began to appear. Not Valdor, not the custodian, but the masked figure in yellow, the one who never spoke, who watched, who stood at the edges of holy ceremony, at the margins of prophecy, the one who turned battles not with blades, but with a gesture, a suggestion, a single glance that changed everything, the one who arrived when the script needed editing. He did not seek worship. He did not claim power. He sought only control of the narrative. And from that moment forward, the Imperium was never the same. There is no record of his return, only patterns, a shift in language, a change in ritual, a hesitation in a sermon that should have been absolute, a dream shared by 1,000 astropaths who had never met, of a golden mask wrapped in yellow silk, watching from a theater that had no doors. He came not as a god, but as a correction, not to kill, but to adjust. The king in yellow does not walk the battlefields. He does not command armies. He does not shout. He inserts a phrase, a doubt, a suggestion whispered into the right ear at the wrong time. A lost data slate discovered on the eve of a war. A prophecy rewritten by a hand no one remembers seeing. He is not a ghost. He is a playwright, and the galaxy is his stage. Those who serve the ecclesiarchy speak of miraculous coincidences, doctrines aligning perfectly with ancient texts never published. Explorator fleets discovering relics exactly where faith had claimed they would be. Prophets dying at the precise moment their martyrdom would inspire billions. Too convenient, too clean, not chaos, not randomness, structure. The king in yellow began to edit reality with precision. His presence was not seen, but felt, as if the very narrative tension of history had grown teeth, as if story itself had a shape, and someone was sculpting it in real time. The Inquisition was the first to suspect, not the Ordo Hereticus, not the Ordo Malleus, but the Ordo Kronos, that secretive sect obsessed with anomalies in time. They began to track patterns, repeats, events that mirrored themselves too perfectly, temporal inconsistencies that aligned not with warp phenomena, but with narrative needs. Like a character returning for one final act, like a villain spared, not by luck, but by dramatic necessity. And always, in the periphery of these events, artifacts of the impossible, a yellow seal with no sigil, documents signed by no hand, a mask carved from forgotten custodian gold. They called him an echo, a recursive presence, a self-editing myth. But Valdor, if it was still Valdor, had ceased to be a man long ago. He had become a function, a conceptual infection, a conscious manipulation of the Imperium's most dangerous weapon, belief. You see, faith in the Imperium is not a passive thing. It is psychic, collective, immense. It reshapes reality. It stabilizes the impossible. And Valdor had realized, perhaps long before the heresy, that whoever controls the story controls the outcome. That is what the king in yellow does. He does not break history. He bends it. He redirects climaxes, rewrites martyrs. He does not need an army. He does not need to kill. He merely waits until the scene demands a revelation, and provides one. And if the cost is truth, so be it. There are whispers, of course, of factions within the Custodes who still feel his absence like a missing limb, of black ships that disappear only to return with altered records, of librarians who, during meditation, find themselves reciting monologues they've never learned, only to realize they were meant to say them all along. The king in yellow is not just manipulating history. He is embedding himself within it. Not as Valdor. That name no longer fits. It is too sharp, too known. He has become archetype, allegory, not the first blade, but the final editor, not the custodian, but the custodian of the narrative. And here is the final horror. He believes he is saving the Imperium, not by fixing its sins, but by containing them within a myth that can survive. A tragedy powerful enough to hold the galaxy together. A script too beautiful to fall apart. Because if the Imperium were to see the truth, the real truth, it would shatter. And so he wears the mask, not to deceive, but to preserve. Not to lie, but to keep the illusion intact just long enough for humanity to endure its own madness. He is not the Emperor's servant anymore. He is the servant of continuity. It is not found on any map. There is no access code, no sigil, no data slate entry. Only a whisper among those who walk deepest beneath the Imperial Palace, of a place not meant to exist. The Velvet Vault, where memory is not stored, but staged. A chamber beneath the Black Cells, below the Sanctum Imperialis, far past even the hidden levels of the Dark Cells. There are vaults for weapons, for monsters, for forbidden relics. But the Velvet Vault holds something far more dangerous. Roles, not items, not data, not truth. Roles, the idea of saint, of monster, of traitor, of martyr, of loyal son. Masks carved not from metal, but from psychic archetypes, forged in belief, saturated with narrative force. Stored here, in velvet-lined caskets like stage costumes awaiting their next performer. Some say it was the Emperor who built it. Others whisper that it built itself. An echo chamber formed by 10,000 years of Imperial myth. A pressure valve for belief too dense to dissipate. A psychic ossuary of narrative power. And at its center, a throne of no name. Not golden, not crowned. A seat for the one who directs. This is where Valdor came. Not to rule, not to plot, but to remember. For in the vault, identity bleeds. Memory fractures. Here, Valdor could pull on the roll of any legend, where the mask of long-dead prophets test outcomes not through force, but through story logic. Here, he rehearsed. Not war, not diplomacy, but outcomes. Picture it. A chamber of masks, each whispering when touched, echoes of ancient scenes. Lorber's fall, replayed 1,000 ways. The burning of Prospero, inverted, recast, rewritten until the emotional cadence matched a desired trajectory. Scenes from the heresy not as history, but as narrative experiments. What if Magnus had bowed? What if Guilliman had fallen? What if Horus had hesitated 1 second longer? Valdor plays them all, not to indulge, not to fantasize, to predict, to prepare. Because if the Emperor had written the first script, then someone must keep the sequels coherent. In the Velvet Vault, time does not pass normally. The psychic weight of the myths held their distort perception. One could live a century in rehearsal and emerge a minute later, or blink inside and forget who they were. But Valdor, if he is still that, remains unaffected. He has become the vault's director, not trapped but merged. He does not wear one mask. He wears them all. In one moment, he is a loyal custodian, watching mankind falter. In the next, a cold manipulator, weaving faith into tragedy. In the next, a dying saint, weeping for a salvation he no longer believes in, because he must understand them all to keep the illusion alive. The vault is not static. It grows. With every martyrdom, every declared saint, every rewritten sin forgiven by the ecclesiarchy, a new mask appears. New roles to try on. New identities to test against the madness of reality. It is not chaos. It is not order. It is narrative saturation. And from this storm of story, Valdor, the king in yellow, emerges again and again. To edit, to redirect, to refine the Imperium's myth until it is unbreakable. But make no mistake, this is not mercy. This is not salvation. This is containment. A galaxy trapped inside its own story, unable to evolve, because the one who wears the mask won't let it. because he believes the only alternative is collapse. And so, in silence, he rehearses. In silence, he adjusts. And somewhere far above, the people of the Imperium cry out to gods who no longer listen, while a man who once had a name sits alone, surrounded by masks, watching the next scene take shape. There is only one throne the galaxy knows. Golden, blinding, eternal. It consumes the flesh of a god, drinks 10,000 souls a day, and yet it does not rule. It maintains, it remembers, it declines in stillness. But beneath it, beneath the coils of ancient machinery and catacomb scripture, beyond the tomb vaults and null space oubliettes, there is another, a throne never spoken of, never gilded, never seen, the hollow throne. No light reaches it, no custodian guards it, no adept records its presence. It does not radiate power, it absorbs meaning. If the golden throne is the death mask of divinity, then the hollow throne is the echo of conscience. It sits in a chamber that should not exist, a space where reality folds inward, where psychic tension and narrative inertia condense into form. It was not built, it emerged, an artifact of belief turned back upon itself. And this is where Valdor sits now, not as a king, not as a servant, but as a judge, not of men, not of heretics, but of ideals. This throne is not power, it is perspective. From here, the king in yellow watches the arc of the Imperium not as a participant, but as a director who cannot step on stage. He sees not just what happens, but what it means. Every crusade, every excommunication, every declaration from the ecclesiarchy. He traces the narrative shape of it all, and when it diverges from the illusion, he intervenes, not with troops, not with fleets, but with correction. A missing document, a sudden miracle, a dream seated in a prophet's mind, a martyr dying on the perfect day to recenter the myth, and if necessary, a character removed from the stage. This is why he left the Custodes, not in betrayal, in necessity, because the Custodes serve the Emperor, but Valdor, he serves the story the Emperor began, and only he knows how much of that story was never written to end. And here, on the hollow throne, he sits in judgment, not of sin, but of thematic deviation, not of chaos, but of inconsistency. If a faction strays too far from its mythic identity, if a doctrine becomes too real, too self-aware, if a hero acts out of character, they are rewritten, not erased, just adjusted, refit to their proper arc. Entire belief systems have collapsed overnight because of him. Doctrines deemed too dangerous, too self-justifying, simply vanish, absorbed into older, more stable myths. And none question it, because belief is stronger than memory. Because if everyone believes a lie together, it becomes truth. And who is left to challenge that truth? The Inquisition does not know of this throne. Not truly. The High Lords believe themselves sovereign, but they play their parts like any other. Even the Grey Knights, most secret of all, carry out wars whose final outcome was decided long before the first demon bled. Because the script required hope. Because the audience demanded redemption. And above it all, in shadow and silence, the king in yellow watches. He does not speak. He does not gloat. He simply ensures the story continues. But at what cost? The galaxy burns, yet the illusion holds. Billions die, so the myth can breathe. The faith of the Imperium is not sustained by victory, but by consistency. The cycle endures. Heroes rise, traitors fall, saints bleed, and nothing ever changes. Because the one who sits the hollow throne has decided. The play must never end, not until the final act, and he has not yet written it. The Imperium does not like anomalies. It endures contradiction. It tolerates madness. But true anomalies, those rare fractures in the momentum of myth, those cannot be ignored. They are hunted, silenced, erased, and when they cannot be understood, they are observed. By the Ordo Chronos. They are not famous. They do not burn witches in cathedrals or lead purges through hive cities. They do not scream heretic in the name of the emperor. They whisper. They record. They count. Their eyes are not on heresy of faith or of flesh, but of time. Time, in the Imperium, is not stable. The war bleeds through it. Psychic resonance fractures it. Nostromo still echoes, and Cadius still screams. Events stretch, recur, skip like a broken reel, and the Ordo Kronos began to see patterns, repetitions, scenes playing out in slightly altered form across centuries, across sectors. Not exact replicas, but narrative echoes, so specific, so rhythmically perfect, that coincidence could no longer explain them. A rogue imperial governor rising in justified rebellion, only to be struck down by a loyalist hero with a lost name. A saint emerging from plague-stricken worlds at precisely the same moment, across multiple millennia, speaking the same lines. Patterns of speech, phrases, archetypes repeating themselves across time. At first, they thought it was the warp. Chaos manipulates belief. The ruinous powers twist myth to their own ends. But this was too clean, too refined. There was no mutation, no madness, just editing. The way a playwright rewrites a scene, trying to get the emotional beat just right. They found something else, too. Something worse. Temporal echoes. Scenes that had not yet happened, appearing in the dreams of psychers. Not omens. Not prophecy. Rehearsals. One inquisitor of the Kronos Order, designated Anon 7, reported a fracture while analyzing the death records of a minor cardinal. The man had died gloriously in 726, M41, defending his parish with words that became canonical scripture. But another record, sealed and redacted, showed the exact same man, speaking the exact same words, dying again in 732, M41, 7 years after his canonization. Same name, same death, same story, different audience. The implication was horrifying, that history was not a path. It was a loop, a performance, scenes reenacted until the desired outcome locked into place, until the emotion resonated across enough minds to stabilize the myth. And in the shadows of all this, Anon 7 found something he should not have found. A fragment of gold, not metal, data, a symbolic construct, coded through a cipher resembling ancient Terran theater scripts. It described a being not named, but framed, the one who edits from silence. A figure wearing a yellow mask, not of paint, but of omission. No face, no voice, no name, only corrections, always inserted precisely at the moment when the story risked falling apart. The Inquisitor sent his findings to the Ordo, then disappeared. His records were deleted. His name, unspoken, but some fragments survived. Not by chance, by design. Because the King in Yellow wanted them to be found. He allows discovery. He curates suspicion. He seeds just enough myth to ensure his presence is felt, not proven. Because belief in him is part of the performance. He must exist on the edge of certainty, real enough to influence, unreal enough to avoid rebellion. That is how you control a narrative. Not through domination, through curation. The Ordo Chronos continued their investigation. Quietly, patiently, but every lead circled back to the same conclusion. The Imperium was being narratively stabilized. Not by the ecclesiarchy, not by the High Lords, not even by the Emperor. By someone else. Someone who understood that belief reshapes time. Someone who could bend a myth back into alignment before it cracked. Someone who rehearsed reality. The King in Yellow had become a function of continuity, a necessity. The longer the Imperium endured, the more fragile its narrative integrity became. And so he worked behind the veil, smoothing paradox, trimming contradiction, ensuring that when the audience looked back upon history, They saw story, not chaos. He was not cleaning up after the Emperor. He was perfecting the lie. And the Ordo Chronos, for all their brilliance, could only do one thing. They named him. They called him the Broken Clock, because he was never early, never late. He appeared precisely when the story demanded him. But the hour he worked toward, the final time he prepares the galaxy to face, it's not marked on any dial. It's a moment yet to come. The last scene, the final truth. And when the broken clock strikes that hour, nothing will be real anymore. He does not lead. He does not command. He appears. When the galaxy bleeds and the curtain trembles, when the narrative stutters on the edge of collapse, the king in yellow enters the scene. Not with banners, not with sermons, with precision, as if the war itself had summoned him to adjust the plot before it frays. It is never the same face, never the same place, but always the same presence. A masked figure in golden-tinged robes, silent, unarmed, yet impossible to ignore. There are reports, classified, redacted, dismissed as apocryphal, of a man appearing before major turning points across mankind's endless wars. Before the final battle of Armageddon's second war, a stranger whispered a line to Commissar Yarrick that would echo in speeches for decades. Before the defense of Cadia, a custodian-shaped blur passed through the camps, leaving behind altered stratagems that no general remembered writing, but followed without question. He does not tell them what to do. He simply makes them believe they always intended to, because war, in the Imperium, is not won by strength. It is won by story, by symbol, by myth that refuses to break, even as bodies do. And in that theater of sacrifice and legend, the King in Yellow is not a warrior. He is the director. When the Astra Militarum begins to doubt, he ensures the martyr arrives at the perfect moment. When the Astartes fracture, he reintroduces an ancient oath, long forgotten, with language too familiar to be new. When a Forge world teeters on schism, he reminds its leaders of the rituals they were always meant to fulfill. Rituals that had not existed until that day. And always the people believe. Because he doesn't change the facts. He changes the context. He does not alter reality. He alters the meaning of reality. That is how wars are won. There is a battle, unrecorded, unnamed, fought somewhere in the Ghoul stars, where time buckled and causality frayed. An entire planet devoured by paradox. Units that died before they were born. Orders that reversed mid-transmission. A total breakdown of logic. The Ordo Kronos arrived to contain it. They found only one thing left behind. A script. A literal script, printed on flaking parchment, outlining the battle's events before they happened. Each unit movement, each death, each final line of dialogue between the surviving commanders. Word for word, all of it had occurred exactly as written. And at the bottom, a note. Not the first draft. Signed not with a name, but with a symbol. A mask. The King in Yellow. He is not omniscient. He cannot control everything. But he can rewrite enough. Enough to redirect doom into sacrifice. Enough to take a slaughter and make it mean something. Enough to preserve the story. Because if the story breaks, if belief dies, the Imperium dies with it. That is the creed he follows now. Not the emperors. Not the thrones. The scripts. And in this vast war of 10,000 years, he is no longer the blade that ends the enemy. He is the eye that ensures the enemy serves the plot. Even the ruinous powers understand narrative. They use it, twist it, exploit it, but they are indulgent, chaotic, sloppy. The King in Yellow is exact. Every death a beat, every victory a rhythm, every failure an opportunity to refine the next act. There is no canon. There is only what works. And in his theater of endless war, only the necessary survives. So if you wonder why the Imperium persists despite its rot, if you wonder how it staggers forward through its contradictions, its impossibilities, it is not just the will of mankind. It is direction. Someone is shaping the story, ensuring it doesn't end until it must. because even war is theater, and the King in Yellow will not let the galaxy fall. Until the final scene, the Great War is not fought on battlefields. It is waged in meaning. The Imperium, for all its guns and gods, is not a place, it is an argument. A chorus of conflicting ideologies screaming over each other across the void. Ecclesiarchy, Mechanicus, Astartes, Administratum. Each believes it holds the truth. Each claims divine purpose. Each wears the Emperor's face like a mask stretched too tight. And one by one, they are brought to trial. Not in halls of law, in the court below, hidden beneath Terra's deepest foundations, beneath even the hollow throne, is a chamber that does not officially exist. It has no name, no key, no location. It is summoned, not entered. A psychic theater, conjured from the weight of belief itself. The witnesses never remember arriving. They wake up there, seated across from a faceless judge, the air thick with velvet silence. The walls are made of parchment, imperial dogma rewritten until it bleeds. And at the center, draped in yellow robes that ripple like memory, sits the director. Not Valdor, not anymore. The King in Yellow. They are not told why they've been summoned. They are not accused. They are simply asked to explain. And it is always the same question. What are you meant to mean? The representatives of the ecclesiarchy speak of divine purpose, of flame and purity, of the Emperor as God. They gesture, they roar, they proclaim. But the King asks again, what are you meant to mean? The Mechanicus answers with logic, sacred calculus. They quote binaric scripture. They declare that knowledge is the soul of man. Again, he asks, what are you meant to mean? The Space Marines, those rare few summoned to the court below, speak of loyalty, of war, of eternal brotherhood. They cite the Codex Astartes, their blood, their legacy, their duty. Again, what are you meant to mean? It is not an attack. It is not even judgment. It is audit. Because the King in Yellow does not care whether their dogma is correct. He cares whether it fits. Whether their ideology supports the weight of the story. Whether their presence serves the rhythm of the Imperium's myth. And if it does not, if it contradicts the arc, if it breaks the emotional continuity of the dream, they are rewritten, not destroyed. That is too crude. Their meaning is adjusted. Doctrines vanish overnight. Saints are recontextualized. The roles of entire chapters shift. Aggression redirected into solemnity. Silence rewritten as stoic pride. Beliefs altered, ever so slightly, until the followers themselves begin to echo a new idea, one they swear has always been theirs. They do not remember the court, but they remember the change, and they obey it, because it fits. The trial of ideals is not about guilt. It is about narrative integrity. It is the King in Yellow ensuring that the play does not break under the weight of its own contradictions, that the myth can continue, can survive the dissonance of truth. He does not care about orthodoxy. He cares about coherence. There is one legend, uncertain, unsanctioned, scrubbed from every temple's vault, of a high confessor who defied the question, who, when asked what he was meant to mean, refused to answer. He declared that meaning belonged only to the Emperor, that no mask could rewrite divine purpose. The next day, he preached a different sermon, milder, simpler, and when asked later about his old words, he blinked, confused, and said, I never said that, because the mask had already adjusted him, because a trial had been held, and the verdict was edited. This is how the King in Yellow protects the Imperium, not through war, through interpretation. He ensures that every belief serves the story, that every ideal, no matter how divergent, supports the same emotional gravity. And if that means changing people, so be it, because people die, but roles can be recast. And in his court below, there are only two judgments. You fit the myth, or you are rewritten to fit it. That is how the Imperium survives. Not because it is true, but because it always sounds true. And the King in Yellow is the one who makes sure of it. He has watched the galaxy spin for 10,000 years. He has witnessed the rise and fall of myths too potent to burn, the decay of empires too structured to collapse, the transformation of flesh into symbol, of men into masks. From the court below to the hollow throne, from the velvet vault to the bleeding edge of every story, the King in Yellow has orchestrated not victory, but persistence. But every story must end, and he feels it, like a tightness behind the silence, like a breath held too long by a god that forgot how to exhale. The Imperium can no longer sustain its contradictions. The audience grows restless. The roles blur. The play bleeds into farce. And so the king begins to prepare the final act. He does not know if he will survive it. He only knows it must be beautiful. This is not apocalypse. Not a scream. Not a flame. That would be too easy. The final act is a collapse of meaning. A world where even myth cannot hold. Where belief fragments. Where symbols die in the mouths of the faithful, and the story no longer feels real. It has begun already. The Eldari speak of the Ranadandra. The last battle, not of armies, but of fates. The Tyranids devour not just worlds, but history. Planets vanish, not from maps, but from memory. They are erasure given hunger. The Necrons awaken, not to rule, but to correct. To strip away the psychic delusions of belief and return the galaxy to sterile objectivity. Even chaos stumbles, because the warp cannot feast on lies that no longer matter. And in the midst of this unraveling, the king works. Not in haste, not in panic, in structure. He visits the vault, tries on old masks. The prophet, the martyr, the betrayer, the loyal beast. Each one still fits. Each one still serves. But none are enough. None can hold what is coming. He ascends to the hollow throne. He reads the final drafts of the final saints. He watches the slow death of symbology. The skull no longer sacred. The purity seal no longer feared. The sermons feel hollow. The administratum doubles down on ritual because it senses the dream weakening. The Astartes fracture further. The ecclesiarchy screams louder. The Mechanicus prays to schematics that no longer function. The script is falling apart. So the king writes. Late into the endless night, he writes. He drafts possibilities. The return of the emperor, not as a god, but as a man. The resurrection of Horus, not as villain, but as mirror. The shattering of the golden throne, not by rebellion, but by applause. The idea that perhaps, at last, the audience is ready to stop watching and start choosing. But each script fails. They are too elegant, too clever. They feel written. And the king knows the truth. He cannot save the story. He can only let it end well. He returns to the court below. No one is there. Not this time. The seats are empty. Because the final judgment is not for the Imperium. It is for him. He asks the question he has asked 1,000 times. What are you meant to mean? And for the first time, he has no answer. Not Valdor, not Custodian, not Masked Watcher, not even the King in Yellow. The myth has consumed him. He is not real. He is only narrative inertia. And yet, there is one last mask he has never worn. Not a role, not a myth. Himself, the man behind the mirror, the soldier who trusted, the friend who stood beside the emperor when the dream was still young, still warm, still full of possible futures. Constantin Valdor, that name still exists, deep within him. Unspoken, unclaimed, but still true. He returns to the vault. The masks begin to whisper. They know. They feel it. The final act is here, and they are afraid. Because if he removes the mask, if he breaks character, then the entire stage might collapse. The actors will wake. The audience will scream. The illusion will die. But he does it anyway. One by one, the masks fall. The traitor, the redeemer, the strategist, the saint, all drop into silence. And then, at last, the yellow mask. It does not resist. It grieves. Because it was never a lie. It was a duty. The weight of keeping the dream alive when no one else remembered what the dream even was. He holds it in his hands. He remembers what the Emperor whispered during the Unification Wars, when the first blood ran cold beneath the golden sky. They won't believe in me forever, but they might believe in you. And Valdor believed. Even after he stopped believing in the Emperor, he still believed in mankind. That if he could keep the story alive long enough, they might become worthy of it. But now he knows the truth. Belief is not enough. Understanding must come, and that can only arrive when the story ends. So he prepares the final scene. It will not be war. It will be revelation. The audience will awaken. The actors will step off stage. The myths will die, but not in vain, because meaning must be chosen, not inherited. And in that final act, the King in Yellow will do what he was always meant to do. He will end the play. He will remove the mask and speak, not as a god, not as a symbol, but as a man. And he will ask the galaxy the question it has always avoided. Do you still want this? And whatever they answer, that will be the truth. That will be the end. And he will be free. There is no applause, no rising music, no triumph, just silence. The kind that follows the end of something too vast to comprehend. The kind that stretches between breath and comprehension when the audience sits in darkness, not because they are confused, but because they have finally understood. The mask lies on the floor. The yellow fabric has unraveled. It no longer shines, and he stands alone, not as the King in Yellow, not as the Emperor's first blade, not even as Constantin Valdor, but as no one, a man without myth, a soul unanchored from performance, the last living witness to a story that was never true, but kept the galaxy turning. For 10,000 years, he sculpted the illusion, not to control, not to dominate, but to preserve, to buy time for something better. But no better future came, and now he sees the galaxy as it truly is. A theater long since abandoned by its playwright, a cast that continues out of inertia, the lights dimming, the sets crumbling, and the audience, humanity, still clapping, not because they believe, but because they don't know what else to do. And so, the curtain falls. He does not stop it. He walks through Terra's lowest depths, unseen. The catacombs groan. The black cells no longer hold. The Custodes do not sense him. The High Lords do not remember him. The Ecclesiarchy would not recognize him without the golden mask. Even the throne does not call to him, because he is no longer part of the story. He is what comes after, what remains when belief ends. Somewhere in the outer void, a planet dies without fanfare. No saint, no savior, no prophecy, just extinction, a silence too deep or echoes. And in that silence, he listens, not for words, not for gods, but for honesty. Because for all his manipulation, for all the scenes he staged, there was always one truth buried deep beneath the masks, the edits, the rehearsals. Mankind was never ready to face itself, so he gave them stories. He gave them meaning when none remained. He gave them narrative because the truth was too bare, too vast, too silent. But now there are no more myths to rearrange, no more saints to write, no more heresies to reframe. The final act is played. The final mask has fallen. And the galaxy must choose what comes next without a script. Will it collapse? Will it awaken? Will it become something better? He does not know. He does not try to shape the answer. That was his mistake. All he can do now is be present. To witness, not to direct. To accept, not to control. Because only then, only in that sacred, unscripted space, can something real begin. He stands at the edge of time. Not as Valdor, not as the King in Yellow, but as the last man to remember the play for what it was. And in his hand, he holds no weapon, only the mask. Its golden surface is dull now, cracked at the edges, no longer imbued with psychic gravity. He raises it once more, not to wear it, to leave it behind. He places it in the dust of forgotten stone, beneath Terra's crust, where no one will find it. And he whispers, Not a farewell, but an apology. Asterisk. I thought the lie was mercy. I was wrong. Asterisk. He turns and walks away. No prophecy follows him. No shadow lengthens behind. Just footsteps. Just a man. The last page turns. The theater is empty. And across the stars, a breathless moment hangs, 10,000 years long, asking the only question that has ever mattered. Were we without the mask? And for once, the galaxy must answer for itself. The king in yellow is gone, and nothing, asterisk nothing asterisk, will ever be written the same again.